Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is quite an interesting thing because it's oil and gas, and it's a topic that I've found highly amusing over the last few months, okay? But the SNP have not really known what they're going to do with it. So the headline in the Daily Record, which a lot of outlets have covered the story, but the Record's the first one I've seen. The headline is SNP are not against new oil and gas licences, says Kate Forbes. Magic. Because if you're like me and you've got like a memory and you're no a cult member in the SNP, you'll remember that during the referendum campaigning for about 2 years before the referendum, that we as Scots were to believe we were going to be one of the richest wee countries in the world because of oil. It was going to be our liquid gold, right? Our paths would be paved in gold and diamond encrusted gateposts due to our oil, as we kept getting told. Then the referendum was lost. Then the SNP had to make a coalition with the Greens, and suddenly oil and gas was the worst thing in the world, right? No. And I've actually had conversations with people, excuse me, I got an itchy nose. I've had conversations with people who are independence nationalists, adamant, no, we never said that back in 2014, actually said quite categorically denying that independence was sold on a dream of riches to be had from oil. So I've found this quite humorous, this whole switcheroo that the SNP have had to go through when they needed the Greens to form a coalition government with them, and then they threw that Butte House agreement in the bin recently. And now we're at an election and they're chasing votes. And you've got people like Stephen Flynn, who is the Westminster was up until Westminster was dissolved, but he was the Westminster leader of the SNP, whose constituency is Aberdeen, which is, as anyone who doesn't know Aberdeen, Aberdeen is ran very much on oil. It's one of the richest wee oil places in Europe. So it's our capital of oil, as it were. And he's obviously fighting for his seat in Westminster, right? So you get this whole thing going on about oil and gas, and I just find it hilarious to stand back as an observer and just watch the mental gymnastics and political gymnastics that the SNP are going through on this subject, that they have to say that they support, or they would lose votes, but they have to say they don't support, or they would now lose any support they have from the Greens, because, again, for those who are not aware, when they binned the Greens as a coalition, they went into a minority government stage, and as a minority government in Holyrood, they have to get budgets through, and they have to make sure they don't get any votes of no confidence, or we would go into an election and vote in a new parliament. So they rely heavily on the Greens, because other parties are like, you're barking at the moon, we ain't going to support anything that you do. So they still need that support to remain in power, because it is very serious. And if they don't find support from them, then at any time in the next 2 years, we could have an early election if there's a vote of no confidence, or if they can't get a budget through. So they've got this hot potato called oil and gas, and it is hilarious watching the mental gymnastics that they're pulling on the subject. But anyway, it's refreshing, because last night, sorry, 2 nights ago, we had the Scottish leader debate on STV, and John Swinney really didn't know where to go with it when he was pressed, right? It was just funny to watch. But Kate Forbes has come out today and said quite clearly that they support gas and oil, and new, potentially new areas looked at. However, there's a caveat on that, right? The whole thing's brilliant, right? So I'll read the story and I'll give you my own opinions when I get to crazy bits, right? So as I say, the headline is SNP not against new oil and gas licences, says Kate Forbes. The Deputy First Minister said the Scottish Government had been clear that it's not against new licences, but developments in the North Sea would need to meet climate capability tests. Now, I'm quite, for the last 6 months anyway, since November and Matheson thing upset me, I've been very highly tuned into Scottish politics, right? People that watch my videos might already know that. And I cannot remember one instance in that time frame where the SNP Scottish Government have been clear at all in their opinion on particularly new licences and developments in the North Sea. They've been anything but clear. But Kate wants us to believe they've been clear. The SNP is not against new oil and gas licences, Kate Forbes has said. The Deputy First Minister said the Scottish Government had been clear that it's not against new licences in the North Sea, but they would need to meet climate compatibility tests, which she's not told us what these are. I don't know what that is. Does that mean for every litre of oil you take out or gallon, you need to plant a tree, and then we'll just pull that up when we want to put wind turbines up? You know, probably something daft like that. This is a marked change in approach from the party's approach under Sturgeon. The former First Minister said future oil and gas projects should not go ahead. It comes as First Minister and SNP Leader John Swinney did not confirm whether his party would move away from its previous stance. While he previously told journalists of the need for a managed transition, Forbes had moved a step further. Speaking to journalists during a general election campaign visit to Linlithgow in West Lothian, Forbes said, "We've been clear that we're not against new licences per se, but they have to meet a climate compatibility test. We're very serious about meeting our climate change targets and obligations." No, you're not. Let me remind you, was it last month or the month before, you had to ditch your target for achieving your carbon levels that you had agreed years ago to satisfy the Greens. So you're anything but. And I've not got a problem with it, to be honest with you, but you can't play both sides here. You've not been very serious about meeting your climate change targets and obligations because you've just put a big barrel of them in the bin recently, right? So stop talking nonsense, Kate Forbes, please. We believe it's one of the most pressing issues of our day. Do you now? That's fantastic. It's evident to everybody else that that's not true. But we also believe that it needs to be a just transition, which means you just can't leave workers behind. We also need the talent, skills, infrastructure and resources in the industry to reinvest. Now this is, again, something that's pretty bizarre about this whole topic about what you do with oil and gas, because the Greens want to stop it. You just don't have any, you know. But for a thing, an industry that has about 100,000 people working offshore, what do you do with them? You see all this bollocks about using their talents and skills. Let me tell you, the talents and skills used in an offshore oil rig are quite different from a wind farm, right? Now, even if you could retrain these people, the average amount of people employed in a wind farm is 7, right? Now, we don't have 20,000, would that be built? And 30,000, but 28,000 of them to build. To put 7 people in each of them, to give all these people in this just transition, which is a word to say, and nobody really knows what it means, right? But the most important thing to me is these people's livelihoods. And to tell me that you can switch them to a greener equivalent ain't true, right? It isn't true. Just please stop A, saying it, and B, everybody else believing it, because it's not possible. However, she added that her party had never said no to further licensing. Well, you did, because when Nicola Sturgeon was in the chair, she quite clearly said, we'll not be doing any more. Now it's we'll rewrite history again on the oil and gas question. My position is that it has to be a just transition. Again, the word transition suggests moving away from. But you said 10 seconds ago that you weren't against new licences, etc. for exploration. So what is it? What are you? Although we think we're a wee bit clearer today because Kate Forbes has decided to say something on oil and gas, we're actually no further forward. Because you're trying to play both sides in an argument here. And it is ridiculously obvious for anybody, even as daft as me, to see it. Okay? We have to remember that requires to be at the heart, not forgetting workers like Labour will, with potentially 100,000 jobs at risk. That's why I think it's about a process, and a process had to be compatible with our climate change targets, which you've put in the bin. At the same time, it's not about switching the taps off tomorrow. Right. Okay, so what is it? SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn, who represents Aberdeen South, has openly said that he thinks new oil and gas projects should go ahead if they meet climate requirements. He is also regarded as influential in the SNP's decision to oppose a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. The continued use of oil and gas is one of the key things accelerating climate change. That's it, says who? Environmental campaigners have said there is a need to move away from fossil fuels as soon as possible to prevent further global warming. So there we go, quite interesting, and I just love it. I genuinely love this whole oil and gas thing that the SNP are going through now. They just don't know what to do. They know what they have to do, but they know that it doesn't matter whether they go left or right at this juncture. They're going to upset people. So who do you upset? Do you upset the voters? They might not vote you back in. Or do you upset the party that you actually rely on to keep you in the first place? It's a conundrum you have. And I'm loving it. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing. But most importantly of all, smash your SNP in any of their remaining cult members or anybody who's trying to drive them away from the oil and gas as a no bad thing for Scotland. Everybody else have a great day. Cheery bye now.